In less than 2 years, the Navy submitted over 500 functional design changes to the shipyard. Think about that. That is nearly one major engineering alteration for every single workday. This led to a statistic that is almost unheard of in engineering. When construction started in August 2022, the design was rated at 93% complete. By July 2024, after the Navy forced all these changes, the design completion rate dropped to 89%. They were literally undesigning the ship while the welders were trying to build it. They were moving walls and pipes on the blueprints while the metal was already being cut. That is a recipe for disaster. It was supposed to be the safe bet. It was supposed to be the program that broke the curse. After the technological overreach of the Zumwalt-class destroyers and the operational nightmare of the littoral combat ship, the U.S. Navy promised Congress and the American taxpayer an affordable, reliable, off-the-shelf warship. Well, that promise has officially evaporated. In a stunning announcement from the Pentagon, Navy Secretary John Phelan has declared the immediate cancellation of the Constellation-class frigate program. 2 ships are currently half-built. Billions of dollars have been incinerated. And the United States Navy is once again left without a modern frigate to fill the gap in its battle line. The official reason? Reshaping fleet construction methods. But let's be real, that is Pentagon speak for a catastrophic management failure. We are looking at a ship that got too heavy, too slow, and too expensive to exist. Today we are talking about the Constellation-class. How did a proven Italian design, one of the best in the world, turn into an American engineering disaster? And what does this mean for the balance of power in the Pacific? To understand why this cancellation is such a massive blow, we have to look at why we needed this ship in the first place. Go back to 2015. The U.S. Navy had a problem. The Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigates were gone. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are incredible ships, but they are overworked and expensive assets to use for lower-end convoy escorts or submarine hunting. The Navy needed a small surface combatant. The littoral combat ship was supposed to fill that role, but, well, we all know how that went. It lacked the firepower and survivability for high-end warfare. The Navy needed a true frigate, a missile-slinging, submarine-hunting, blue-water combatant that could be built fast and cheap. They held a competition, and to avoid the mistakes of the past, they mandated that the design had to be based on a parent design that was already in service. No experimental hulls, no sci-fi technology. There were 3 main contenders. First, General Dynamics offered an upsized version of their Independence-class LCS. This was, frankly, a non-starter. Trying to stretch an aluminum trimaran into a 5,000-ton missile frigate was a physics nightmare, and at a projected cost of $1 billion a hull, the Navy rightly laughed it out of the room. It was basically a PowerPoint presentation with no steel behind it. Second, you had the Spanish F-110 design from Navantia, partnering with Bath Iron Works. This was essentially a diet Arleigh Burke, a solid ship, but perhaps too close to what we already had. Finally, you had Fincantieri offering the FREM, the European multi-mission frigate. This was the gold standard. It was serving with the French Navy as the Aquitaine-class and the Italian Navy as the Bergamini-class. It was quiet, effective, and looked beautiful. In 2020, Fincantieri won. The plan was perfect on paper. The Italians would provide the hull and the mechanical guts. The Americans would install the brain, the Aegis combat system, the new SPY-6 radar, and standard U.S. missiles like the SM-2 and ESSM. Because of the Jones Act, a law requiring U.S. Navy ships to be built in U.S. shipyards, construction would happen at Fincantieri Marinette Marine in Wisconsin. The Navy ordered 20 ships. The first one, USS Constellation FFG-62, was supposed to be delivered in 2026. It was hailed as the return of common sense. Buy a Ferrari chassis, put a Ford engine in it, and drive it for 30 years. What could possibly go wrong? As it turns out, everything could go wrong, and the blame lies squarely with the customer, the U.S. Navy. According to the Government Accountability Office report that dropped just before this cancellation, the Navy committed the cardinal sin of shipbuilding. They couldn't stop tinkering. Despite buying a proven parent design, the Navy decided the Italian hull wasn't American enough. They didn't just change the radar, They changed the structural scantlings, the bulkheads, the survivability standards, and the propulsion layout. In less than 2 years, the Navy submitted over 500 functional design changes to the shipyard. Think about that. That is nearly one major engineering alteration for every single workday. This led to a statistic that is almost unheard of in engineering. When construction started in August 2022, the design was rated at 93% complete. By July 2024, after the Navy forced all these changes, the design completion rate dropped to 89%. They were literally undesigning the ship while the welders were trying to build it. They were moving walls and pipes on the blueprints while the metal was already being cut. That is a recipe for disaster. And what is the physical result of all this meddling? The ship got fat, really fat. The original FREM is a balanced 6,000-ton vessel, but the U.S. Navy requirements for survivability and system redundancy added weight. Then the design changes added more weight. The Dismit ballooned from a projected 7,300 tons to 7,600 tons, and finally, recent reports suggest it hit 8,200 tons. To put that in perspective, a Flight 2A Arleigh Burke destroyer, a ship with 96 missile cells and way more firepower, is only about 1,000 tons heavier than this frigate. When you add 1,000 tons of steel and wiring to a hull without changing the engines, basic hydrodynamics takes over. The ship gets slow. The original requirement was for a top speed of roughly 28 to 30 knots, standard for a frigate that needs to sprint to catch submarines or keep up with a carrier strike group. The Constellation, in its final bloated form, was projected to have a top speed of just 24 knots. Let that sink in. 24 knots. That is dangerously slow for a modern warship. The French nuclear carrier Charles de Gaulle moves faster than that. Fleet oilers move almost that fast. If a carrier strike group wants to sprint at 30 knots to launch aircraft or evade a threat, the Constellation would be left behind, wheezing in the wake. It became a liability before it even hit the water. Then there is the money. The selling point of this program was cost efficiency. The initial contract estimated a cost of about $790 million to $800 million per ship, a bargain compared to a $2 billion destroyer. But design changes cost money, delays cost money, material inflation costs money. By 2024, the cost for the first 10 ships had jumped from $8.7 billion to $12.2 billion, a 40% increase. If you strip out the design fees and just look at the hardware, we were looking at $1.1 to $1.2 billion per ship for a slow frigate with only 32 missile cells. At that price point, the strategic value collapses. Why buy 2 compromised frigates when you could buy 1 world-beating destroyer for the same price? And finally, the schedule. This is what likely killed the program today. The lead ship, Constellation, was supposed to be delivered in 2026. We are now at the end of 2025. Do you know how much of the ship is actually built? 12%. That is not a typo. As of late 2025, the lead ship is essentially just a keel and a few modules sitting in a shed in Wisconsin. There was absolutely zero chance of this ship being delivered next year or even the year after. We were looking at a 2028 or 2029 delivery for a ship using 2018 technology. So, Secretary Phelan pulled the plug, and honestly, it was the only move left. Continuing to pour money into a ship that is overweight, undergunned, and years behind schedule is the definition of the sunk cost fallacy. But this leaves the U.S. Navy in a terrifying position. We are in the middle of a massive naval buildup by our peer competitor, China. They are churning out Type 054B frigates and Type 052D destroyers like sausages. They are standardized, they work, and they are in the water. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy has just admitted that it cannot build a frigate based on an existing design. We have lost a decade of time. The Arleigh Burkes will have to soldier on, running their hulls into the ground because there is no relief coming. What is the lesson here? It's not that the Italian design was bad. The Italian and French versions are excellent ships. The lesson is that the U.S. Navy's procurement system is fundamentally broken. It suffers from an addiction to gold plating, the desire to add every possible feature and survivability standard to a platform until it breaks the platform. They tried to turn a European patrol frigate into a miniature American battleship, and in doing so, They created a Frankenstein monster that couldn't float, at least not affordably. The cancellation of the Constellation-class is a tragedy for the shipbuilders in Wisconsin, and it's a strategic black eye for the United States. But it should serve as a wake-up call. We cannot continue to reinvent the wheel every time we want to build a ship. We cannot continue to change the blueprints 500 times after construction has started. The Navy says it is reshaping fleet construction. Let's hope that shape involves some discipline, because right now the only thing we are building is a legacy of failure. What do you think? Was canceling the Constellation the right move, or should they have tried to fix it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on this developing story and the Navy's new plan, make sure you hit that subscribe button.